everyone. Good morning. How's everyone doing at this point? Yeah, that's good. You still have energy, woo, and brain space. Yay, hopefully. Well, we've got a few great groups to come up today, or people to come up today. So we're gonna jump in and get started. The way that we're going to do this is each group or each person will come up here and do their presentation, and then we'll do questions that are individual to that person, because that way, if you are switching around or whatever, we know you can get a chance to ask questions. And it's also easier if you can remember the questions right then. And then if we have time at the end, we'll also have group questions there. So, sound good? Okay. So we're going to start out with Mikel Neault, who is the Director of Digital Experience and Access at the Art Institute of Chicago.
So as Liz mentioned, I am currently Director of Digital Experience at the Art Institute of Chicago. Before that, I was a strategist and producer with Ralph Appelbaum Associates in New York City. Before that, I was a producer and strategist with Second Story Interactive in Portland, Oregon. So 3 very different posts, but all of them have to do with storytelling in physical spaces. So that relates to today's talk and what I think is something of an undervalued element of design when you're looking at interpretive spaces. So today's talk is all about information design for interpretive spaces, and I put the title JELLYBEAN in the name for this talk, but that was actually just a ruse to get you into this space, because there is no candy in this conversation, but we can all go out for jelly beans afterwards. So I thought I would start out with an infographic to explain how this talk is going to go, since this is all about information design. So I've split this talk up into 3 different parts across 41 mind-blowing slides. And so the first part is really about origins, what is information design, and I'll talk about that a little bit more anecdotally than a strict definition of it. And then I want to get into typologies and archetypes. So what are the types of information design? What are the content strategies that you can use to exploit them? And what are the different forms that they take? And then lastly, I want to get into some case studies. So what are some real examples from the field, and how are people using these in the gallery space? So I wanted to start out with how I actually got inspired to do this talk. And it goes back to an experience that I had when I was about 9 years old. And I went to Gettysburg, and I encountered a display that was communicating how many horses died during the Battle of Gettysburg. And it looked a little bit something like this. So it was a representative display to communicate the fact that about 3,000 horses died during that time period. And for whatever reason, this has always stuck with me. I don't know if it was the vastness of the scale or how of seeing everything in front of it. I just mocked it up here. I couldn't find any images of it online, so I don't know if they still have it up. But while everybody else is remembering, Splash Mountain in Disney World, I'm apparently remembering a dead horse display at a Civil War museum. But I wanted to look at this anecdotally, and I wanted to unpack this for a minute. So I wanted to think about, okay, what is really trying to be communicated? A curator came upon this fact: 3,000 horses died during the Battle of Gettysburg. How are the different ways that we can look at it? So this is kind of the standard approach that a curator would take. Maybe they would have a photograph, or they would have an illustration or something, and they would just write it on a label. So the curator at Gettysburg had a little bit more of an interesting approach. And what they did, and I think the reason that I actually remembered this, is that beyond just having a statistical display, there was a small little button, a capacitive switch that actually lit all the horses up. So that one little element made it stick with me for 30 years or so. So then I want to unpack that even further. So what are some other things that you could do? And one of the things that information design is very good at is contextualizing. So that's an interesting number, but what if you actually look at it in the context of the entire Civil War? So this is a really simple graphic that shows Gettysburg as this teeny tiny little thing, which suddenly becomes insignificant in the expanse of how many horses died during the entire Civil War, which I see people's jaws dropping. So that's comparing two similar things, but what if you wanted to compare two dissimilar things? So this is the number of horses that died versus the casualties of people during the Battle of Gettysburg, so 50,000 versus 3,000. So sometimes comparing apples and oranges can actually give you a really interesting story. So these are just statistical information. What if you want to give it more of a personal bent? So another interesting fact that I came across was this woman, Miss Lydia Lester, after the Battle of Gettysburg, found no less than 15 horses on her front lawn. A somewhat unpleasant fact, but that alone kind of really brings it home to know that one person in particular who had a name found this slaughter on her front yard. So I thought, well, if you're in a gallery space, what are the different ways that you could actually do this? Now, putting a whole bunch of horse corpses out in the gallery space might be a little unpleasant for your audiences. But what if you did something where you actually took saddles, or if you could find an artifact and have that kind of splayed out? So this is a really simple mock-up, but you could see how impressive that might actually be to be walking among that information. So to suddenly have it visualized in a form that you can relate to. Okay, so enough about dead horses. Let's move on to the next part. So I want to talk about the different strategies that you can take, what I would call interpretive strategy or content strategies. So these are the different things that information design can do really well. Like I mentioned, they can communicate scale extremely well. So really, when you want to show something beyond just a number, you can really blow that out into something that people can see. So one of the other things it can do is to communicate patterns, and I'll show a couple examples of that later on. And then one of the things that can do best is really communicating context. So when you're comparing things that are similar, you can really get a deeper sense of information, and when you're comparing things that are dissimilar, you can even get deeper. So then I wanted to go through a number of different examples in how these can be used in the gallery space. Because I think we often just defer to two-dimensional graphics, and there's actually a lot more that can be exploited for gallery spaces. And I think magazines like Newsweek and news journals like Wall Street Journal and New York Times take advantage of this all the time, but I think we as museum technologists and designers don't often think of this for our gallery spaces. So I'll go through a couple of sculptural examples, architectural examples, looking at some environmental graphics, a few animated pieces, and then looking at some actual interactive infographics. This is the Magic Move feature on Keynote, my personal favorite. So I wanted to start with this example. How many people have seen this gallery space? So just a few. But this was designed by Ralph Appelbaum Associates, a company that I used to work for. This is a World War I memorial in Kansas City, Missouri. And what this is as you go into the museum, there's a glass floor, and suddenly you're walking over 9,000 representative poppies. So that's representing the 9 million people who served in World War I and died. It's not just American soldiers, it's people from all over the world. This was a really inspiring example for me. There's not many examples like this out there, but I thought it was a really creative use of what would otherwise just be a really static number. One of the things that it does is that it actually creates a breathtaking experience. So you don't have any ground underneath you, and it takes what is a breathtaking number and makes it literally breathtaking. This is an example designed by Dan Goods, who is at NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab. And what he wanted to do was to communicate the expansiveness of our universe. So what he did is he filled 6 rooms with sand that people could come in and touch, and it is to represent all of the galaxies in the known universe. So to do that, you actually can fill 6 rooms with sand. So people are able to pick up the sand, touch it, and then of course what he wanted to do was to put that into context. So he took a single grain of sand and a microscope, and he drilled a hole in it, and I still have a tough time wrapping my head around this. So this is to represent all the planets in the Milky Way. So this is thousands of planets Our planet barely even registers in this microscopic little hole. So I thought this was a fascinating example because this is something where kids can go in, they can touch the sand, they can sift it through their fingers, and that will create a really memorable experience. So going from a very small representation to a very big representation, this is a memorial that most of you have probably been to. This is the Lincoln Memorial in DC. Really interesting fact about this that I didn't actually know is that each of the pillars surrounding the Lincoln Memorial are to represent the 36 states that Lincoln helped to unionize after the Civil War. So this is infographics writ large. This is about as large as you can get. And each of the names are etched up in the frieze above that. So moving on to environmental graphics. If you're not familiar with this term, it's really just graphic design in a three-dimensional space. So this is an installation by Stefan Sagmeister. This is a show that he did called The Happy Show. I think it started out in Philadelphia and has traveled to a number of different places. This is one of the few participatory infographics out there that I'm aware of. So what people actually do is they come in, they select a gumball based on how happy they are, and over the course of the show, it will give you a barometer of how happy that city is. So I thought that was a really fascinating thing, and I guess you do get a little bit of candy out of it. This is another slide from this piece, and one of the dangers of using infographics in a physical space is simply that it could end up looking like an annual report. Sagmeister was really smart and he put a bunch of naked people up there so it doesn't look like an annual report. This is from a show called The Statistics Band, and this is for a health museum in Dresden, Germany, designed by Art Plus Com. What they did was they took an entire gallery space and enveloped it with what appears to be one single statistic thing. So the whole thing is unified by statistics. Now, of course, once you actually get into it, and I'll talk over this video, it becomes interactive, it's communicating different information, but everything's at a relative scale. So when they're talking about really big numbers, you can start to see that it actually fluctuates based on the relative scale of numbers. They were also really smart in designing different interactive elements to this so that you can go in, it's not just a static display. So they use all sorts of media to supplement what they have going on statistically. It's not just numbers. So the next couple examples are what I'm calling animated infographics. And again, the New York Times takes great advantage of this. We don't often think to use this type of information design when we're talking about museums. So I wanted to show one example from the New York Times, which I think is one of the finest examples of animated infographics
is one of the most dominant
out there.
closers in history. But what may be most remarkable is that he has done it by confounding hitters with mostly one pitch, his signature cutter. John Flaherty of the Yes Network faced Rivera as a hitter and also caught him when he played for the Yankees.
From a hitter's standpoint, he's out on the mound. It feels like he's not even putting any effort into it, and the ball explodes on you. And from a catching standpoint, he's the easiest guy ever to catch because he throws the ball right where you want it.
Rivera uses a seemingly effortless delivery, which he can flawlessly repeat, pitch after pitch. His cutter is thrown very much like a fastball, but the pitch has significant lateral movement. He creates and adjusts this movement with the different pressure he puts on the ball with his fingers. The pitch's lateral movement keeps it off the bat's sweet spot, moving in on the hands of a left-handed batter and toward the end of the bat of a righty. To a hitter, Rivera's cutter first appears like a straight fastball, making it hard to distinguish the two pitches during the first fractions of a second when the hitter must decide if when and where to swing. Hitters often rely on reading a pitch's spin to determine what pitch is coming, but Rivera's fastball and cutter have what appear to the hitter as the same spin. Many pitchers throw their cutters more like sliders, with their fingers pulling down on the side of the ball. This can create more downward and lateral movement than a cutter, but it also creates the signature spin of a slider, a spinning red dot, that the hitter can recognize and adjust to. With identical deliveries and spins on Rivera's pitches, hitters are at a loss to identify and then attack the pitch until it is too late, and the balls end up in very different locations. Here are the nearly 1,300 pitches that Rivera threw in 2009.
So this is the part
frozen
that's
at the point
brilliant.
The batter must make his swing decisions. But with few clues to determine the pitch's ultimate location, the batter can be faced with guessing at these outcomes. Here are the cutters to left-handers. Here are the cutters to right-handers.
So they've given you
And
some
fastballs
background.
to right-handers.
I personally
He
know
throws
very
almost
little
no
about,
fastballs to
about
lefties.
baseball, but now I'm
As
suddenly
this map of
completely
his
captivated by
2009
this.
pitches shows, Rivera is remarkably adept at hitting the corners, keeping the ball away from the middle of the plate, the easiest spot for a batter to make good contact.
Looking from this perspective, it's not surprising that the real hot spot is inside on a lefty. I think he could hit that spot with his eyes closed.
Rivera's simple but effective formula has made him baseball's most dominant closer.
Okay, so that's a piece that was in the New York Times. You may be thinking, okay, how could I use that in a museum? This is from the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is a piece that Ted Williams actually designed, and what it's showing is the exact opposite of what that animated infographic was showing. It was showing his sweet spots and where he thought he would hit about a 400 batting average. So Ted Williams, if you don't know, has the highest record for highest batting average in the 1940s with a 406. So he actually designed this, and if you could put those two together, if you could put the display, the physical display, with an animated piece, I think you would have a really powerful interpretive element. So here's my last examples for case studies. I wanted to talk about interactive infographics. This was a piece designed by Second Story in Portland, Oregon. This is at the Hunt Library in North Carolina State University. And what they did was they took a large amount of municipal data, which if you've ever had to look at a website trying to find municipal data, it is never pretty. And one of the things about this is they put it in a public space. They designed it well so that people could go in and then it could actually talk about it. So rather than having it hid away in a private site or a website, here it is, it's all out in the open, and people can look at health, they can look at education, and they can have conversations together about it. This is another piece that Second Story did for a climate science museum in Washington, D.C. And they wanted to visualize a number of the difficult data streams related to climate science. So this is showing the relationship between carbon dioxide output and temperature change. Here we're showing the different energy expenditures with different nations, so comparing Russia, China, United States. And then it starts going into the different sectors and which different industrial sectors are expending the most carbon dioxide. But making it something that you can actually dive into, I think, makes people just that much more engaged. So I wanted to end with some tips and best practices for things that you can do, tools that you can use when you're thinking about doing different gallery designs. One of the things that I often do is I'll create an experience diagram. So we'll take an axonometric picture of the space, and then we'll think about, okay, well, where could the infographics actually fit in? So this is just a random axo diagram that I found, but is it something that comes at the beginning? Is it something that becomes more of a motif throughout? So like the statistics band that you saw from the Dresden example? Is it something that's just more of an accent, like the Ted Williams piece at the Baseball Hall of Fame? Or is it something like actually a big move where you're coming out over a sea of poppies and seeing all of the statistics underneath your feet? So I didn't get into this too much in terms of the graphic design, but there's any number of different forms that an infographic can take, anything from a bubble diagram to a stanky diagram. They're all meant to communicate different types of information. But I think this would be a good subject for next year if people are interested to really get more into what the graphic design can do to support your information. This is all part of my effort to insinuate more design talks into MCN. So I'll leave you with some takeaways, some guiding principles. A label is really just a starting point. Think beyond labels and into the realm of experience. I think data may be the largest untapped resource available to museums. We don't often think of it as an actual asset or an artifact, but this climate science museum that I showed you in DC really had no artifacts. I think they had a single lump of coal as an artifact. So once you start thinking about data as an artifact, you can do some really interesting things with it. And then lastly, numbers as symbols are really an abstraction. That's why people have such a difficult time with mathematics, is that most people conceive of them really just as an abstraction. So use all the tools available to you to transform the abstract into an experience. I hope I shared some examples of that with you. Give it a personality, give it a story, and give it a form. That's it. Thanks for listening.
So my question is, when you have numbers with larger than orders of magnitude,
Yeah.
how do you visualize it? We use logarithmic, but then skew the picture. So what do you do in this case?
Yeah. Well, could you give me an example?
Yeah, so you have some numbers that are, say, in the tens, and some numbers that are in the hundreds of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
When you put them together, it's difficult.
Right, right. So he's asking about orders of magnitude when it comes to scale, and I think the classic example of that is powers of 10 with the Eameses. So what they do is they show a multiplicity of designs so that you have different things going on at the same time. So I think what they're using was a movie to show orders of magnitude in terms of relative scale. Uh-huh. I don't know, is anybody from Gettysburg in the room? I'm not really sure if anybody's in evaluation and wants to talk about it. I mean, can you explain a little bit more and sort of just you're interested in how people respond to these and whether it's effective or not? Uh-huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, I think with these work really well if you know a little bit of information beforehand. So if you have a little bit of context, say in the classroom, and then you go in and you have an experiential thing happen to you, I suspect that you're going to remember it a lot more. So in terms of reinforcing, I think that's what these physical infographics can really do, simply because the brain is much more adept at remembering things in a physical space than if it's just a textbook. Thank you.
I'm fine with more design at MCN.
Next year.
Yeah, especially if it's experience design. Okay, next up, changing gears just a little bit, but we have Kathi Kaiser and Tanya Treptow from Centralis. All right, this makes a sound, right? You gotta watch out. Nope.
Oh, nice.
Okay. We're good. It's just the screws are not working. There we go. All right, great. Wonders of technology.
All right, great. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Kathi Kaiser. This is my colleague Tanya Treptow, and we're here to talk to you about evaluation. It's actually a nice segue from that last question from the last talk. How can you learn about the experience that people have in the context of using digital in the gallery? We work at Centralis. We're a user experience research and design firm based in Chicago. And we spend a lot of time with people watching them use things, basically trying to figure out where things are working well, and more importantly, where they're not, where the points of confusion are, so that the design can iterate and improve and eliminate those points of confusion. And lately, we've been spending a lot of time in museums, which is a great place to be right now, because the paradigm is really shifting in terms of how people are experiencing life in the gallery. What was once more of a passive or a looking experience is becoming a co-created experience through digital media. And this poses a lot of questions about how people are actually engaging with the technology. Now, historically, museums are very good at understanding a lot about their visitors. There are a lot of methods in the evaluator's toolkit to get a sense of who's coming and why, right? That's a well-established area of museum evaluation. And similarly, after the visit, there are a nice set of tools in the toolkit for getting a sense of how well it went and what people took away from the experience. But what we're interested in particularly is the during. What happens in that moment when the technology is in the visitor's hand and they're looking at something digital, but they're also looking at the experience around them? How does that work for them? Is their experience enhanced by having the digital? Are they distracted? Are they confused? What's going on in that moment? And here we feel that the toolkit isn't doing such a good job right now at helping us answer these questions, because there are a lot of questions at this moment in time. They roughly fall into three categories. Questions of discoverability, can people find the things you want them to use? Usability, can they actually manipulate them? And then, of course, appeal, are these things that people want to use? So I'm going to talk quickly about each of these. With discoverability, of course, the key is people need to know you have an interactive, that you have an app. But even beyond that, within the use of an app, can people find all of the content and features? Can they discover everything that you've built in there for them to use? If they can't, then they're really missing an opportunity. Similarly, with usability, once they are able to locate the features that you want them to interact with, do they know how to do it? This is kind of usability. We view all of this as usability, but this is usability with a small u. It's the actual manipulation. So do people know to type and swipe and scroll, and can they actually make this thing do what they want it to do? And does the interface behave the way that they expect? So if there's a mismatch between how people expect something to work and how it actually works, then they're going to become frustrated. And then, of course, oh, and here's a great example of that. I don't know if any of you have been to the Churchill Museum in London, in the War Rooms. I highly recommend it. It's a great museum experience. This here is an interactive table that runs about 30 feet through the center of the museum. And it's about waist high. And it's a great infographic, really, about the life of Churchill. It's organized by time. And you can pull up documents, images, videos about various points in Churchill's career. The problem is that it's not a touch screen. And I think it was built just before that technology became widely available. So I myself and my fellow visitors spent a lot of time trying to make it do things that it just doesn't do, tapping and swiping and really trying to interact with it, when really what you need to do is use buttons along the side. So unfortunately, it was a frustrating experience that required the user to learn how it works instead of working with what the user wants to do. All right. And then ultimately, of course, whatever we provide people needs to be something that they want to interact with. It needs to be part of a compelling experience and not a detraction from it. So all of these questions, there are a lot of questions here, and it's really important to consider all of them, because if you miss any piece of the puzzle, you end up with either missed opportunities or frustration or apathy. And it's kind of a hard nut to crack in terms of answering all of these questions. And what methods are really available to us to understand how to get all of this right? And what we want to do today is talk about how usability testing can really take us a lot of the way towards understanding what's going on in the galleries. And this is through seeing your experience through your visitor's eyes. And that's really the key to usability testing. It's putting aside what you know and what you understand and what you believe about what you've built, and really seeing how the visitor sees it and using that to improve the experience. So Tanya's going to talk in detail about how that works, but I want to share some of the kind of core beliefs of usability testing and illustrate them with a few examples. All right, so 3 simple rules for usability testing. Number 1, test with real users. Real live visitors, either people who have actually come to your institution or people who represent the types of people who would come to your institution. And hint, that's not you. It's not your colleagues. We're all patrons of our own institutions, but that doesn't mean that we can be effective testers of the technology. We are not the fresh eyes that we need. And here's a quick illustration to bring that point home. Do we have anyone in here who's not familiar with this symbol? Anyone from outside the US? No, okay, a few. All right. Those of us who are familiar with it know it as the logo for Major League Baseball, right? And you can see the batter holding back the bat and the ball. Well, when my daughter was 2, she had this in a picture book, and she pointed at it, and she said, "Quack, quack, quack." And I thought, why are you quacking at Major League Baseball? But if you look at it for a moment, you can see it. Yeah, there's a duck head and the beak and the tail. And the same thing goes for your interactives, right? You bring your knowledge, your frame of reference to what you see. She didn't have much baseball background, but she knew a lot about ducks. So that's what she saw. So that's why it's so important to test with your real users, because they're going to have their own frame of reference, and that's what you want to understand. You can't leave behind your frame of reference, which is you're basically too smart about the application. You need to get that naive view. All right. Rule number 2 is to give people tasks. So it's not enough to hand someone an interface and say, what do you think? Because what we see is actually influenced by what we're trying to do. There's too much in the world for us to process, for us to take it all in. So we filter out things that are irrelevant. And for that, I've got a short demonstration as well. And if this is something you've seen before, I ask you to just play along. It is a fairly popular demonstration. But what we have here are 2 teams of people. It's a short video. And each team is passing a basketball back and forth. Okay? So I'm going to give you a task. I want you to count the number of times that the team in the white t-shirt passes the ball. All right? Here we go. All right. Everybody counting? How many times did you get? Okay, yeah, in the teams. Yeah, did anyone notice anything unusual? Okay, yeah, the gorilla. How many people saw the gorilla? Okay, that's usually about what it is. Usually about half the people see the gorilla, and the other half are like, what, a gorilla? Here, let me show you real quick for those of you who did not see. Because now this time don't count, right? Just watch. When you were counting, you were so focused on that ball. And the first time I did this, I'm like, I'm going to be a good participant. I'm going to count, and I'm not going to get it wrong. And yep, there's the gorilla. All right, so this is why it's important to actually have people do something when you want to evaluate the task, because they're going to see things differently from that framework. And in the real world, they are going to be trying to do something. They're going to be trying to learn about an object or follow a tour or whatever the task may be. So it's going to be important to give them that frame of reference. All right. And then the third simple rule is to ask questions, albeit to do so carefully. So this is not an observation-only method. This is not something that you can do standing in the corner trying not to interfere with the situation. It's meant to be diagnostic, right? So you don't want to miss the moment of confusion. You want to be right there with someone as they're struggling, so you can ask them, what are you thinking? And you can hear what they verbalize. And if you miss that moment, then you're not going to learn as much. So it is an interactive method. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to talk more about the details.
All right, thank you, Kathi. So at this point, we have some tools to use that Kathy's given us. A frame of mind, some tasks for users, some questions to think of while you're doing a test. At a lot of the sessions here at MCN, we've seen that this is where talks end, and it's great that these things are being discussed. You should do usability testing or formative evaluation. But the next question is, how do you do these techniques? And there's still a big gap between saying, we're going to observe our visitors, our users, and then taking that information and saying, I have this evidence and this data to make good design decisions for either a change to the specific technology or to the next iteration of an exhibit in a gallery. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of approaches we use during our usability tests to make sure we're gathering the data that's helpful when we analyze and make design decisions. And then I'm also going to talk really quickly about a case study we've done with the Field Museum in Chicago this past summer to talk about some real-life applications of our methods. So Kathi has shown you this graph as some of the risks that can happen in usability testing. When you're actually doing a test, what's helpful as a starting point is to think of these risks as things you want to see, behaviors. So frustration, things people miss, apathy. These are the behaviors you look for as you ask people to do tasks and listen to their responses. And for us, this is what's important in these usability tests is it's not just watching someone. We know that there are techniques of observation and seeing authentic visitors during a visit to a gallery and using technology, but this specific method is really useful as a diagnostic evaluation. And to do that, it's not just standing there, it's a conversation. And it has to be done in the right way so you get feedback that is authentic and is not biased by your own viewpoint, your own perspective of the gorilla or no gorilla, but you're just taking in what the participant sees. So I have 2 slides here to kind of talk about some key approaches we use and some ways we implement it in tests. So the first one is we focus on what's the cause of a behavior that we see. And so you'll see these 2 pictures here. On the left side is somebody looking over the water. That's our idea of somebody doing a test, a usability test. And you're alone and you're trying to understand the evidence. But that's not really what a usability test is. It's a joint activity between you and your participant. So for us, we let our users help us. And they do that by thinking aloud during a session. And so we do this before and during. Beforehand, we always orient our participants. Before we give them tasks, we say, we're going to give you some simple things to do with this interface or with this exhibit or experience. And what will help us understand what's working or not working is if you can think aloud for us. So that's, we tell them, tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you understand, what you're confused about. All that will help us understand what makes sense to you and where the experience could improve. And then during the tests themselves, we continue to ask questions, very open-ended questions, things like, what do you see now? Tell me more. Or what do you understand at this point now that you're completing something? And this way, we don't actually have to do the analysis. Our participants tell us what they understand or don't understand. It's a very easy method. And it's not just a behavior where you see them missing something. They are able to articulate a little bit more, you know, I see this, and they don't say, I see that. We have some evidence. Another thing we focus on, in addition to the cause of behaviors, is the impact. And we were talking a little bit earlier about impact in a general way over the years after an exhibit experience. This impact is a bit smaller. It's the immediate impact in the test itself. So if somebody's having a problem, are they falling off a cliff? Is it something that causes them to want to stop using their digital technology in the exhibit? Or is it something more like a cactus where, ouch, that hurts, but I'll try this instead? So a bit smaller of an impact. And once you understand the causes and the impact, then you can make better design decisions in a pretty easy way. And so for this, the impact question, what we do in our tests is we let users fail, but we help them to fail in positive ways. So again, this is something we do before our tests and during. Beforehand, we help orient people to what our goals are. We say, this is not something you should be worried about. You can't fail here. We're interested in how this experience is working. So if you're confused or you feel like you don't understand, that's okay. We want you to talk about that problem that you might be having because we want to understand where it's coming from. So that really helps our participants not feel like they're the ones with the problem and gets us a lot more feedback along the way. And that method of orienting our participants also helps during the sessions because as we're talking about perspective, one of the most important things is not to tell participants what you know about the gallery, about the interactive. You want to see what they can understand. So sometimes you have to step back. At a lot of times, you don't want to give them the easy answer. You want to understand how frustrated they get, as we're saying here. And the only way you can do that is if they feel comfortable talking about an issue they have and that it's not reflecting poorly on them. So a lot of upfront work is needed to do this effectively in a usability test, no matter what the scale of your test is. Okay. So I want to talk quickly about a case study that we did with the Field Museum in Chicago. This is a mobile app meant to help facilitate a user's visit into galleries throughout the museum. There's a number of aspects to this app. People could take a pre-organized tour, maybe some objects within one gallery or alternatively objects throughout the museum. People could also create their own tours based on their interests, choosing different objects that they like to put together. And then third, people could go to an object, use a QR code, and discover information directly, multimedia content, panoramas, and different things to learn about a specific object without going through a full tour. And so we worked with the Field Museum with 2 days of usability sessions, formative evaluation, and some of the main questions we have were, what mode did people appreciate most? What did they prefer to use to explore within the gallery? But also, did they even want to use this technology? And then even further, what did they have trouble using or what facilitated their learning experiences? And so you can see our participants here. What we did was videotape our sessions with a person observing, and also we had a camera on the mobile app itself. And this way we could share our results with the staff of the museum and with everybody here as well. So we're going to go through a couple small things that we saw that we want to kind of talk through our process of learning during the sessions. So here's just another picture of the technology we used. So the first area that I want to bring up is a usability issue, as Kathi was saying. How do people actually understand the processing of an interface of the technology? These kind of problems can be small, but they can have a big impact on the experience. So I'll be showing a quick video. It's 2 minutes long, and I'm going to give you a little bit of orientation in advance to know what the intent of the app is, and then you can observe yourself and see what behaviors there were, and I'll ask you to keep in mind, think about what the causes of the behaviors are and the impacts. And so what you'll see here, this is an inset of the device and the larger experience in the full screen. This is a specific object. These participants have used a QR code to pull up an image of the object and some text information about that object. They also have an option to scroll left to see a map of that object, scroll right to see more interactive content, multimedia. There's a bit of that content. They can also scroll down to see some buttons that take them to some interactive tours so they can get into that other experience. So let me show you what happened within this test.
Is there any other information about the totem poles in the app?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you're sort of swiping down a little bit and trying to, what are you hoping to have happen when you do that?
I was hoping it just open up a little bit more, but it's good where it's at. Okay, and that's the tours. So as we go down, I mean, I think this is just generally where we're at.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you were, here at the museum exploring, what would you do next at this point?
I will go to another exhibit.
Okay.
And they actually tell you about the person that collected these elephants from Kenya. And you really have a nice picture.
That's a nice picture, yeah.
Really, really, really nice picture of this. And yeah. So that's what I probably would be doing, just going taking different images and taking pictures.
Okay.
You know, and then, you know, coming back and reading the rest of the history with that. But I would definitely download these.
Is there only one picture of the elephants, or are there more pictures? I'm honestly not sure.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't, maybe we can go here. Let's see. I don't know. That's one. Oh, it's one of 6. Oh, but that's the bears. I don't.
Yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah. That's the bears, and then 3 of 6. Well, how did we go to grizzly bears?
Okay, so you were on the elephants.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at grizzly bears, and it's not really clear how that happened.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little confused.
That's actually nice. I do like that. I do like the video because, I mean, they're not alive here, but to see them alive, it kind of brings you closer to the exit. I like that part. I just don't like this, where I didn't see that. Okay. I was totally blind to that, and then I looked at, what is that green spot, and I tried to touch it, and then it moved over. I think if it had like a little section, it'd be a lot easier to get to.
All right, so from that, hopefully you could pick up a few things. You saw some of the questions that we asked that were open-ended, and you could also see that our participants had a different range of introspectiveness. The first participant never knew she had missed all the wonderful content of this app and would have just left and gone to something else. Our second participant knew she had missed something, was able to learn about it, and we got her feedback on what was causing that issue. It was the size of the little buttons on the screen. And so you can really quickly see what are the impacts of these problems and what are the causes. And that really helps to make the design decisions, and we haven't done that work. It's the visitors and the participants who help us with that. Another very quick thing is the discoverability issue. Within the apps, there was the tours area, and every tour started with an introduction. It had a how-to guide with how to get started doing any tour with a map and how you navigate through the app to do things, and then more specific information with objects. And it was very open-ended. People could explore at whatever point they wanted. But we saw that a lot of participants used that initial map that was an example, and they thought it was the starting point and ended up all the way across the museum from where they wanted to be. And so once somebody did that, there was no way they wanted to use the app at all. So that was a very high impact. And we were able to get the feedback that that was because of an expectation. People expected that once you start on a specific tour, everything would be related to that tour. So a general how-to in the middle of that tour was unexpected, even though it was meant to have more open-ended experience within the mobile app. It wasn't accomplishing its goal, and it was a pretty high impact problem. And so, seeing that in the test, it's always hard to have problems come up, but it really helps solve an issue really quickly. And the Field Museum has been able to prioritize what issues to fix within this app with pretty limited changes. So for example, taking out that example map was something that helped pretty immediately to get people into the tour they're interested in that specific information. So it really helps in the iterative process. And so as one last point, I think we might have just enough time or not. We don't have to do another video. But we shouldn't leave out things that are good in your diagnosis either, because these are things you want to make sure you keep. You can see this joy on this participant's face. I'm going to take 30 seconds and just play this. It's going to be quick.
Well, it tells me that I can do the discover thing. So if I want to find out about the World's Fair, anytime you see the special QR code, scan it using the discover button. Got it. So let's try that. See how it works. So we're scanning. Let's see, so I scanned.
What's happened?
You have got to be kidding me. No freaking way. That is absolutely amazing. You've got to be kidding me.
So You can see these tests capture the variety of experiences, and you just have to be aware of how to observe both and really take away those barriers to the joy that visitors can have. So thank you very much.
All of the above. So sure, the question was, when is the key point in the design process to come in and do this type of evaluation? And we're from Chicago, where the motto is vote early and often. And that's what we would say here as well. You can do this with paper prototyping very early to kind of work out some of the kinks in the interaction. And then as you add content, you can do iterative design. So that's the key. This is a small sample method. You don't need many to learn a lot. So I would recommend doing it as often as possible, sort of at increasing fidelity as you get closer to release.
And I will add too, this is a fully functioning app. We did 2 days of testing. We found the answers immediately in the sessions. We were able to talk to the team about it a day later. We provided a report 2 weeks later, and they made changes that really had a major impact, even without any more budget that could to do that. It was small changes. Well, this particular project was 8 people. In our recommendations, the typical sample size, the least is about 5 participants. These are cognitive things. And so when you have 5 people, you can see trends across that. If we have different audiences, like for example, if you're doing adults versus children's reactions, if you have at least 5 people for each of those audiences, you can make overall generalizations a little bit better.
Sure. So discoverability is people's awareness of what's available, and that could be of the app or interactive overall, or it can be of specific areas. Like we saw that in the video clip here, that our first participant never discovered the additional content. She never knew to swipe. Understandability, I suppose that term would be an umbrella that might include discoverability, but also some of the more sort of mechanisms for interacting. And learnability, the second part of the question was thinking about learnability and studying interface in use over time, and absolutely. And we do some longitudinal work where we go back to the same people when they're using an interface over time. The first time is the toughest test. So you tend to learn most when people have never seen it before. So that's the most common way that we approach it. Sure, yeah. Sure, the question was, does the interactive facilitation of the sessions impact the data? And sort of calling out a difference between what you see in formative studies versus summatives. And we would say that the goals of those 2 types of evaluations are different. In a formative study like the ones we're talking about here, we're really trying to diagnose problems. We want to understand, if someone is confused, why, what's causing it, what's the impact, how can we change it? So yeah, we're going to have people stick with an experience longer than they might in the real world. We would never recommend doing this type of study without also that type of study. Hybrid methods allow you to triangulate towards issues. But yeah, really we try to get as much as we can out of every participant. So we wouldn't do things like measure time on task because we're interrupting them all the time.
Two related questions. Do you give them any preparation before you just sort of hand them the device and the app? And the other question is there any sort of structure for how you kind of make notes of their reactions, or any sort of format that you use to kind of systematize those really kind of
great question. And yes, we do give orientation to participants, usually because we recruit people who aren't familiar. So that's not really grabbing somebody who's already explored a gallery a bunch of times. It's having somebody come in to the museum who maybe has not been there for a year. We give them an orientation saying, please pretend that you've come to visit today and you're interested in maybe this or maybe that. We're going to give you a few tasks like such, for example, please use this app and you want to understand what it can add to your visit. We also do the please think aloud. We do the don't worry about failing, you can't go wrong here. And then we let them go forward. And then during the test itself, we usually don't take notes. We tend to videotape and just observe, but we will refer to those notes afterwards. We have workshops afterwards also to discuss ourselves about what are the major trends you see. Because it's not just, you can't go by one person, it's an aggregate type of qualitative analysis. Right. Thanks so much.
Okay, next up we have Mary Michael Stump, and she will introduce the rest of her team from the university galleries at the Texas State University.
Thank you. I feel really like I'm starting small behind this podium. In fact, I'm going to move over here a little bit. I would like to say that we epitomize the thinking big, starting small, and we also, what you're about to see is an illustration of when you don't have a lot of money, but you do have a lot of resources, and how you can think collaboratively with what you have and know what stones to overturn. So I am going to be presenting with my colleague Grayson Lawrence, who is in the communication design faculty in the School of Art and Design at Texas State, and Dr. Dan Tamir, who's in the computer science department, also at Texas State University, just about 4 hours down the road. So howdy on behalf of Texans. Let's see, just to orient you a little bit, and before I start with this, as you saw on the first slide, if you'd like to, I gave you some gallery exhibition guides. We're going to use one image from this exhibition guide that you can use. We're going to show you a truncated demo of musing in just a little bit. So if you came in late and you want to get one of those, they're on the chair back there. But the galleries are... the university has about 38,000 students, just under 38,000 students, and the galleries have a contemporary art focus. We have 3 exhibition spaces totaling about 4,800 square feet at the time of the study, and we have about 20,000 visitors per year. So we do 20 exhibitions on average, and we are funded by student service fees, which is really important because we have to tie our exhibitions to curriculum outcomes. That means that we're focused on the needs of our campus, but we're also focused on the needs of the regional arts community. Anybody who knows about academic museums and galleries know that we serve 2 masters. We have to function as a viable arts venue, but we also have to function sometimes for uninitiated viewers who are coming to a gallery museum for the first time and looking at contemporary art for the first time. So that said, contemporary art can be challenging to people who are not used to looking at it. And wall labels really don't allow for multiple learning styles. So what we wanted to do, what I noticed was when I give gallery talks, which I give often, I could always see little light bulbs going on over individuals' heads when I had a chance to point to art and talk about technique and history and artists' intentions and those kinds of things. So I really wanted to be able to give that kind of experience all the time, but obviously I can't stand in the gallery all the time. So that said, we also have a demographic that has a very high rate of smartphone usage and accessing the internet from their smartphones. So this is why we did it. The pedagogical design, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into this because I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that you guys understand about modalities of learning tied to senses, sight, hearing, interactivity. I also know that you probably know about John Falk's visitor types because we've already seen that in one other presentation. That said, we started at the turn of the 20th century with John Dewey and his art of experience and how interactivity is important in visitor making meaning. We take John Falk's visitor types, we take learning modalities, we talk my experience with students in the gallery, and then we add into that the fact that the students were coming in, I saw this time and time again, with their smartphones, taking pictures of the artwork and taking pictures of the labels. And as soon as I saw them doing that, I knew that we could leverage that physical action and that willingness to take their phone into the galleries and take it out and be brazen about it into developing an app that helped them create meaning. I will also say that what makes this app so special and the collaboration so meaningful for me is that it's a very basic and simple way for visitors to get a variety of information. It's also a really simple way for the curator, maybe somebody who, let's say hypothetically, is not a digital native, to input information. If you can upload information to Facebook, you can do this. So, Grayson's going to talk about the user interface, and then Dan's going to talk about the collaboration and the design of the technology, and then we're going to show you a little demo.
So we designed Musing to be as simple as to use as possible. One of the things that we wanted to do with Musing was to provide information in didactic information. We wanted to take all that information off the walls, labels, and actually place them over the images of the artworks on the screen so you can actually interact with the artworks to get video, audio, all sorts of other extra information that you wouldn't get from a normal wall label. We also wanted to make sure that you didn't have to use any external devices, no QR codes, no other information or other devices that you had to install in the gallery to keep it cheap. It needed to be adaptable, so that means that you didn't need to, we wanted to make it sure that you guys didn't have to program it every single time information changed. We also wanted to reduce the reliance on loaner hardware. So there was a lot of times where you have those loaner hardware, the audio guides in the gallery and all that stuff. That takes a lot of money to maintain and buy them and clean them and charge them and all sorts of stuff. So could we use the devices that other people have, your visitors have with them all the time? So one of the main interfaces of Musing as the app is this interface. So you actually go in, and I'll show you this in a moment. You actually can go into the gallery, use your phone's camera to scan the image. It recognizes what painting you're looking at or what image you're looking at and places these little points of interest or POIs all over the piece. So each one of these POIs, you can make it go to an audio source, a video source, another website, whatever you want to, and you can place these POI exactly where you want them to. So you can, if you wanted to talk about technique, you can place them right over a certain brush stroke that you wanted to talk about. The administrator side is completely web-based. So you log into a website, you upload your photos, you place your POIs, tell them where to go, basically, tell them which POI goes where, and then that's pretty much it. So I'll show you that here in a minute. So I'm going to switch over to Dan, and he can talk about some of the technical issues.
Okay, I need to see my slides. So I first wanted to say how the collaboration started. So how the collaboration started and how a collaboration between computer scientists and you know, the art and the gallery people started and how it can be maybe duplicated. So my areas of interest were kind of focused on signal processing, the signals being speech, audio, image, I was interested in imaging, video, and data compression. And then at some point, the department head came and say, I need somebody to teach the computer graphics. You do image processing, please teach the course. And you don't say no to the department head. So I learned computer graphics, and I taught the computer graphics. And then he came and said, now you teach computer graphics. We need somebody to teach the graphical user interface, which is very different. And again, I didn't say no. But then I realized that usability is probably the most important thing to teach when you teach graphical user interface, because technology may change, but usability is a very key issue. And then I had an issue because usability is generally kind of a cognitive art emphasis, not a summative approach, but formative approach. And how do I teach usability to computer science students? And being, tending to be formal, I looked at summative, and I looked at something that is called effort-based usability. So I do want to look at time on task. I actually have eye tracking, so that's something that you can consider, like see how the user interact with the software based on eye tracking. You can do it in a museum. So all of this kind of leads you to something that is more appealing to computer scientists. So actually this led to collaboration with Grayson. We actually kind of did collaborative project and teaching in the usability in my GUI class and in his usability class, collaboration, which is here. And then now I'm working with Grayson and a person from the social science on virtual reality mobile apps. And last thing that I want to mention, I also work on a non-destructive UI, where you don't have to look at the user interface in order to interact, and this can be used in cars, so you don't have to text, and also for visual impaired. And just to say, so, why did me and Grayson collaborate so good? Maybe because we don't know how to say no, but also kind of the lesson learned, and I'm not going to read, so I think you have to identify the common and complementary areas of interest, co-teaching, and work together on multidisciplinary funded research, which today is kind of very encouraged. So I'm looking for this. And then maybe kind of advisory board type, like maybe having a person from the computer science in your group and vice versa. And I think that the stuff that I listed at the end is kind of things that are probably very open for collaboration. Human-computer interaction, mobile applications, imaging, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and so here are some of the technological things. So first of all, we thought that using open source is very important. So we are using OpenCV and OpenGL in our applications. It's available on both platforms, and it's easy to use. The next thing that was important for us is, or important for me, is the robustness. You can have many different image recognition approaches, and the question is, how do you search for the last one, or for the best one? And how am I with time? Okay. Okay. So there is a lot of research that have been done already, trying to identify images not by keywords, but by the image. And of course, Google is very interested in it, Facebook. And this research have been done, and we can leverage on it. And the last thing kind of sounds strange why I'm bringing it. I just gave a presentation in the philosophy department about Turing machines and Turing humanoids. And the question that I had in mind is, when will robots start to shoot on people? And this will be really artificial intelligence. And by the way, there is a movie that is coming. It's called The Imitation Game. It should be a very good movie about Turing life. So why am I bringing it? If robots are going to shoot on people, they probably are going to do very good image recognition. So if you have a lot of resources, you probably can do good image recognition. We had to do, we had to find the thing that works. So we also worked into the server-client model, and we had some issues on how to interact with the OS. And I want to say is that sometimes people are misled, especially computer science students. They would say, oh, should they do it in C++, in Objective-C, in Xcode? And you may have all of these things running, and you don't know. And I would say, this is where you need, say, my expertise to tell the student, it's not really important what language you choose. The last thing, of course, is the KISS approach. I took away the S for stupid because nobody is stupid. But so you have to keep it simple and producing high quality software with undergraduate students. That's a challenge. They are only for 1 year, and how can you do it? And the solution is focus. And the last two things is beware of the square wheels. We tend to reinvent wheels. It's okay as long as they are not square. And because, you know, so many people are doing so much work. And the last thing is start big or small, end big or small. I don't know what's the right, I generally start big and end small. Or you end it up when it's not fun anymore. And last slide, you didn't include it. So that's okay. I did have a slide that is more formal, that is showing, it's called the confusion matrix, that is showing, here it is. Okay, so the confusion matrix is kind of showing our ability to recognize images. So on the, say, x-axis, you have reference images. On the y-axis, you have experimental images, where we took images of pictures from different aspect ratios and different angles, and what it shows is our level of recognition, which I should say was actually very, very good, but very good in the specific type of images that we are looking for, and we do know that we have some deficiencies with other types of images. We'll talk about those. Yeah.
Okay, so Grayson's going to do a quick demo, really, that shows you what it's like from the curator side when you develop content and you're putting it in, all the way to you, the user, which is why I gave you these exhibition guides. If you will, you can turn to page 6, which is an image of a collage by an artist named Carrie James Marshall. This was from an exhibition that we had this semester, selections from the Bearden Project. And Grayson's going to show you, we've already predetermined the very truncated content for 2 points of interest. And so he's going to just kind of take you through step by step. Do you want to start? Okay, so this is from the admin side. You log in and you, we're actually naming the library because we want this to be a multi-institution app. We want any number of places to actually use Musing, so it's important that you name the library, what exhibition the visitor is actually looking for. Then he goes to the file and he picks a wonderful picture of Carrie James Marshall, puts all the bio information in there, and that sets up the library for that artist. This becomes important because once you input that artist information, it goes into a library. You don't have to keep inputting that information. You just choose from a drop-down menu. So once you get that, you add an image simply by uploading it from your library on your desktop. There is the image. Then you put the information in, just simply typing it. He already has this. You can do this, you can cut and paste from a Word document, or you can just type it straight in. And I'm vamping while he's doing that. A picture's worth 1,000 words. See how he chose that from the drop-down menu under Artist? So those are all the artists that we've used thus far in Musing. Now we're going to edit points of interest. We're going to actually describe certain aspects of a technique, art history. We can link to a web video. We can link to an audio file. We can... you guys are, he's going faster than I could even say. So you see, he's just dragging and clicking. He's just like clicking on what area he wants to put that information. And Grayson, you're getting so fast at this. It's much fast. We're worried about time. Well, that's not the title. Okay. So we're saving the POI after each time. Then, this is where you guys come in. If you downloaded music, I will say that in this phase of it, because this is just the beginning of this project, it's only available in an iOS form. We're moving to Android in the 2.0 version. But so once you get to musing, you look and see it's not in there yet because he hasn't updated. But once you update, then you go down to the bottom and there's Kerry James Marshall. You click on that, it synchronizes to the exhibit, and then you get this frame, which you will get on your phone, and you just take a picture of that image, and you'll see that these different points of interest come up. And you can just touch it with your finger, and then there's no swiping. What's that? No, that's fine. You can take a picture if you want. But really, so all the content is overlaid onto the image, and it's just really intuitive. The beauty of it is its simplicity. Where'd it go? Okay, there it is. And right, so one important aspect of this is the ability to favorite artworks within the exhibition so that you can capture that information. It saves it onto a library in your phone specific to you, so that, let's say you're a freshman and you're writing a paper for an Intro to Fine Arts class, and you go back to your dorm and you need all of that content, you have it with you. Another important thing to note is that you have to go, when these things are live in the live libraries, you have to go to the galleries to get that information. And that interactivity allows you to sort of decide what kind of information you want and what you want to capture. When the exhibition is over, it's up to the institution to decide whether or not they want to move it into an archived gallery. And if you downloaded Musing, you'll see a number of archived galleries. Some of them are our permanent collection. Some of them, we have another institution that's actually testing this for us, Blue Star Contemporary in San Antonio. So some of those exhibitions are from there. And that's going to be a part of this next step that we want to take, because it's going to allow sharing and conversations to start amongst that. So Grayson, you want to talk? What's that? Oh, well, this is a test. You want to talk about this? Okay.
We started off with a small gallery for an exhibit for Eric Zimmerman. Consisted of 5 artworks. It was a very short gallery, about 38-day long. We had 242 visitors and 49 respondents to an exit questionnaire. 89% felt that they understood the artwork better. We were really happy with some of the outcomes. We thought most of our visitors are students, so we were very happy to see that 93% wanted to actually see it come back. So we added it to other galleries and exhibits, and we were able to try it out quite a few times. Couple things that we realized that we needed to work on through user testing and other means. We needed to work on we had some image recognition failures in some galleries. Whenever there was think of a Rothko, or it's just like completely red, or not Rothko, that's correct. Where a completely red piece, then it couldn't recognize it because it didn't have enough features to recognize off of. And then we wanted to work on some of the server issues to make it a little bit more usable for you guys.
Okay, so some of the future enhancements, we actually plan to add in-app data acquisition and data analytics. The next thing is we want to increase the interaction with social networks. We actually can enhance it for two-way communication between the visitor and the museum. It will actually become more augmented realities than a virtual museum. Visitors can leave comments. We are working on support for additional platforms. I guess we have this 2 times, so you see how important it is. And then the image recognition can be improved, and we can work on image recognition of 3D objects, enhancing the usability, expanding the accessibility. Maybe you want to say a word about, no? Okay. And then, so that's it. So these are the things that we have. I wanted to mention that we have this running, or we had this running in San Antonio. I think it's called the Blue Star Museum. They actually took it, almost nothing, no information from us, just presentation of what it does, and they got the software, they were able to work with it. And the reason I'm mentioning it is that I think we are interested, if people here are interested in working with us, no fees, just giving us feedback about how it works, so we will be very happy to at least talk with you and see if you're interested in using it in your environment, then we are interested too.
Thanks, appreciate it.
It's a website. It's a website. Correct. Yes, yes. So everybody has their own login, and so you can't see our stuff, we can't see your stuff. So it's completely that way. Right. Yeah. Just email us. Any one of those emails will help you out. We can set you up. So you were asking about what algorithms we used. We used OpenCV, so maybe Dan can talk about that for a minute. And then you were asking about whether we would use glass or not. Oh, 3D objects, right.
So maybe starting with the second question, there are things that can make issues with respect to the image recognition. For example, if you do have a glass and the artifact is reflective, then you will see your own picture there, and we don't want to recognize your picture. So that's a problem. For your second question, we actually were trying to use as much as we can from OpenCV, which is Open Computer Vision, a library. And the method that we used was actually trying to identify key points in the two images, several hundreds of key points. So if there are not enough key points, we fail. But actually, in the examples that Grayson said, we can do very good on this type of images, but we just didn't take it into account. So if an image has a lot of details, then we will identify key points in the image, and we have these key points saved in our database of the image, and we compare the key points, and in most of the cases, we get very good recognition.
We used this on was a photographic exhibition, and one of the images was really dark, and we didn't really think anything about it except for the dark photograph behind glass meant, and coupled with that, I have a Orla Keeley iPhone case that has a pattern on it, so when I held my phone up, the black of the image, the glass, the reflective surface, and the bright contrast and pattern all form the perfect storm. And so it looked like, to musing, it looked like a different image. This is why, testing is so important, because I will say it was a mad dash to change that content from that image to one where that situation didn't occur, because we were kind of under the gun and didn't have time to, test it thoroughly before the exhibition opened. So there is that. And those are some of the things that we're working on right now. Yes, on the front row.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision to have the people use their cameras to create the images on the app, as opposed to just providing the images yourself? I mean, obviously it's very cool with the image recognition, and I guess it saves space, like it makes the app a little bit more compact. Does it also kind of create a benefit of having the user be more participatory?
Yes, did everybody hear the question? The question was why we chose for the visitor to use their own hardware as opposed to, is that what you mean?
Well, their own image. So my understanding of how
correct. Right.
As opposed to another app which might have the image of the piece already present.
Right, okay, got it. So why the activity? Why the action of actually capturing the image? Why using the image recognition as opposed to just having it be a static bit of information? For me, and maybe these guys would answer differently, but for me it's rooted in educational theory, in interactivity, which, like I said, you know, starts at the turn of the 20th century with Art of the Experience and John Dewey and his notion of enriched learning environments. And there is sort of that moment of engagement that actually Mikel was talking about in his presentation, where the horse is lit up as opposed to just a static graphic. And I think even though it's a very small thing, I've noticed the difference in the libraries, the archived libraries versus the live libraries. It's not as, it feels, I don't know, less postmodern or something. You know, it's a little less top down, I think. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, the other thing is that we didn't show this, but the app, and Mary Michael kind of talked about it, the app does allow you as a museum person or administrator to actually choose whether they have to scan it or not. So you can actually just make it a permanent gallery, and then they don't actually have to be there. They can get it from home or whatever. One of the advantages, I think, for using the image recognition is you actually have to be at the place to actually be there. So it's almost to see the information. So Blue Star is using that as they're using the permanent gallery as kind of a teaser. So here's one piece that you'll see at the show or the exhibit, but if you come, then you'll see more type of thing. So I think we're seeing different people use it in different ways.
As the director of a university gallery, my goal is to get people in the doors. And so for our students, I have a feeling, just an inkling, that maybe they might not come if the information was available to them in other ways. So I will say that's another selfish thing. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add something else, which may not, we can still consider loaners. So we don't have to assume that the visitor has an iPhone or an Android. And actually today you can go to the iPhone 3, or which is still compatible with it, which will not be expensive. So I just wanted to mention this. That say the gallery might have a few loaners for people that don't have the access. And let's see if there are any questions.
So the question was, do we have Wi-Fi access in the building, and do we require internet access? Yes, it does require internet access. We do provide Wi-Fi in the building, but I was running off of in our demo. I was running off of the LTE. They're the 4G LTE, just the cell network. So it'll work on Wi-Fi, cell network, whatever. Yeah.
So another design consideration is that we did not want to rely on hardware as much as possible. So you can put, all kinds of things like Bluetooth and things like this that museums do today to help with the guidance. So the only thing that we rely on is the Wi-Fi.
All right, I think we're pretty much there. You can always find everyone.
Thank you.